Just a quick review of some of the purpose and etiquette of the meeting. This is the FN project community meeting number 2. And I think the etiquette's pretty straightforward. I think everybody on the call was on it last week. But just for a quick review, anybody can add topics to the agenda at any time. I think they'll go on in suggestion mode. I'll pretty much just accept suggestions as they come in or ask for rewording. Add your name to the end of the list if I missed you, the attendees, so we know that you were on the call. Feel free to comment and review PRs and issues as we go throughout the week, and then we can discuss those in this meeting. Keep yourself on mute unless you're talking. That will help, as background noise is pretty distracting. And you can raise your hand in Slack on the meetings, or just talk at any time. The group is going to stay pretty small for a while, I'm sure, so feel free to just jump in and ask questions or interrupt the flow at any time. It's not that big of a deal. We'll be pretty laid back and about these meetings. Some key information, roadmap, team values. We're working on all this stuff as we go. I actually did take the roadmap and put it into this document just because it's going to be a super working roadmap for a while, and keeping it on GitHub through PRs is a little bit inconvenient. So for now, I'm going to try this model. Okay. And then I think everybody here was on the call last week. If anybody was not on the call last week and you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to.
Sure, I'm Paul Felix. I'm also at Oracle in a small group that collects internet data and provides analysis and provides that in cooked ways, I guess. And I'm very interested in looking at, using FN project in a production environment eventually as a means of, providing public APIs to data access. And so that's why I'm here. I guess, I try to just be a fly on the wall. I appreciate the opportunity to do so and to see, where it's at and where it's going.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Paul. And feel free to ask questions here or through Slack. Just so you and anybody else knows, there is a managed service of FN called Oracle Functions that might also suit your needs. It's in limited availability, so you can request through the product managers. I'm happy to make that intro for you if you want. They give you early access. Otherwise, the FN open source project is mostly what we discuss here, and that can certainly be used if there are things missing from the managed service today. And there should be an easy path back and forth between the two as the service and the open source evolve together.
Well, it's good to know. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, community time is pretty much open community questions, feedback, etc. I think the group is pretty small today. I put a few things in here just to highlight some of the things that have happened in the last week. Daniel couldn't be on the call because he has weekly stand-ups at this time, but he's at Facebook. He's working on a side project, so he wrote the C# FTK. So if anybody wants to get a chance to take a look at that, he also submitted a link to it in our documentation, which is awesome. So it should be automatically included in the FTK documentation for community-supported FTK. So if he was on the call, we'd thank him for that, but he's not, so that's all he gets. We've got a couple new Medium posts, one from Abhishek Gupta about building Slack apps on FN, always a popular topic, since Slack and memes and serverless go really well together. And then if you haven't checked it out, Artun has a 3-part post, actually, very involved about using ZB for business process management, like BPM style stuff with FN project. Dan Anderson wrote a blog post about using Caddy to generate SSL certificates for FN. And then there's a bunch of presentations going on as we speak. There's a couple Oracle codes. There's something else going on, I think I've noticed across Europe. And then there was a presentation recently by Bristol University's Christopher Woods, so talking about HPC workloads using FN. So I'll put the links in here. We try and tweet everything through the FN Project Twitter account, as well as blog about the interesting things through our Medium, so keep an eye out to those. Anybody else want to add to the community time? Cool. Moving on. This should be a pretty straightforward meeting. The roadmap I moved into here, there's a number of things that keep coming up in terms of roadmap. Reed and I had lunch with someone and discussed the importance of like the async support along with Kafka and batching. So I want to make sure that that's captured on the roadmap. Stability and deployment are something that we keep talking about, mostly because it's like, okay, you got this thing, it's in 0.6 or 0.7 or wherever we're at, I forget, pushing towards a 1.0 at some point this calendar year. So the question becomes, how do I deploy that thing? What does the architecture look like? Is it reliable? Is it performant? Actually, there was a really interesting comparison of all the different function frameworks from, I don't know, I think it was set to the Big Lebowski, which I think is super cool. I think they had some older FN code, or it wasn't optimized, or there was a regression in the performance, so it didn't look as amazing as it should. So we're going to work with them to ensure that they have the right, I think Reed's working on some stability and performance. Anyways, I'll try and find a link to that and post that as well. But on that note, so distributed setup, Kubernetes, non-Kubernetes. Daniel, the creator of the C# FTK, talked about single server mode and the desire to, oh yeah, thanks, Reed posted that. And the desire to run it in basically not on Kubernetes in single server mode, but like make it kind of look production-y, which I think is a perfectly great idea. And I think we should definitely have some documentation that talks about that. So anyways, bullet 1 talks mostly about stability and deployment, performance, reliability, that kind of stuff. I think that's going to be key for version 1.0. Documentation cleanup, I added in here. I mean, documentation is sort of one of those like unspoken, doesn't need to be explicit. We just need to keep working on it. But I think that there's a number of areas where our docs are in process being cleaned up. Michael, who's on the call, has been putting a lot of effort into that. And I know a bunch of people have been helping with that as well. So hopefully we can continue to push that forward. Triggers, I think Kafka, it keeps coming up. In the last meeting, we talked about a WebSocket type eventing model, either using gRPC triggers, HTTP2 WebSocket type flow. I think Lambda has something like that for IoT, so that's something that we want to consider. And then update and fix the UI, and then FN flow is on there. Is there anything, the roadmap, I think this is really just a high level discussion. Again, I don't think we're ready to start making decisions on the next big chunks of work. But are there things that absolutely should be on here that we should discuss on a weekly basis that's missing? Okay, I think it captured most everything. The roadmap, there are some of those items that are listed. If you click, oh wait, am I even sharing my screen? Sorry. Maybe I'll share my screen here so you can just follow along with me. Firefox, share. Oh, there. I guess that makes it easier in case anybody wants to view it. Yeah, so there's a roadmap in our community documentation up top, but also I'm going to start posting into this doc. So I think Dennis mentioned a new item he wanted to discuss for the roadmap below, something about secure base images. Dennis, do you want to talk about what that is that you're?
So yeah, recently, so as far as you know, we have a base images Docker files being moved to FDK repositories. So the one thing that started bothering me when the other folks added a special FN user to those Docker images, because before that we used a root user to run the FDKs, but now we have a different user inside of the image. So that change, it wasn't like a necessary change, but something desired for just desired. So and it pushed me to think about like, how do we provide secure images? I mean, like the static analysis security, because as far as you know, the Docker Community Edition, they have like the commonly accessible images, but also within the Docker Enterprise Edition, they have a bunch of base images like for a different operating system being with some security fixes in it. So for now, we have the event CLI that has hard-coded certain images, but they are but users can actually change them to their own images. But as part of the event distribution, we have FDK, we have event server. But how do we ensure users, like future event users, that they can actually use our base images? How can we ensure them that they are secure for their workloads?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a pretty broad topic that we've been thinking about for a long time in terms of how to, because the surface area of something that doesn't expose the container interface is a lot smaller. So for example, if Amazon needs to patch something for Lambda, they go and patch it on the back end, and all the code just has to ensure that it supports that version of those patches. However, the pros and cons of containers, as I see it, is you get exposure to that and you can use any code that you want, but on the flip side, there needs to be a way to ensure that those stay secure over time.
That's why I mentioned the project from CoreOS Stack. They have a static analysis tool called Claire. So basically, they ensure that they're trying to compare what they have within the operating system that is in the container. They comparing to the amount of open security issues that are available somewhere. So they can tell you that your image has this type of vulnerabilities, and this is how probably there's a certain fix that they need to apply. So maybe this is something we can also do as part of the CI jobs we have in the FDK repositories. It might actually help us to at least ensure users that those images that we offer you, they are good for any production work you can do with the FM.
Using CI tooling of base image. Okay, I think that's a pretty good idea. That's probably something pretty simple that we can integrate in quickly. So basically running security scanning on a regular basis using our CI tooling across all of our base images. Okay.
Yeah, that's possible. But one more question. I know that Reed disagreed about keeping Docker files in the FDK repositories, because a long time ago we created a repository called Dockers that was a placeholder for all Docker files we have for every image created since Iron functions. Mm-hmm. So we have lots of different things that are not actually used there, but most of people who work with FN, they work with FDK. So basically they use our images that are in FDK repositories. So maybe we can do some static scanning only after we have all FDKs have their own Docker files in their repositories, because it's going to be a bit simpler to do. Because, for instance, Python FDK, it doesn't use the Alpine image because there are certain libraries that doesn't work on Alpine well. They require Debian for that. So there would be like different types of checks for the particular image in the future. But like I will prioritize the items need to be done before doing scanning. I'm gonna put some comments here later.
Okay. Okay. I think what would be helpful is maybe we could start like a specific wiki page on this somewhere within the GitHub organization, because there's a whole lot of conversation that probably needs to happen around this. There's some simple steps we can take, and then there's longer term vision of where things go in the space. I'd like to make sure that we capture that, and I'm not sure notes here is the best place to do that. Do you mind maybe kicking up a wiki page somewhere?
Yeah, can you just create a to-do thing so I can just keep an eye on that? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. This is Greg from Automate.
Hey.
So this is a really interesting topic for us. As you know, we're a decentralized platform, so anybody can be running nodes that in turn run functions. And let's say you write a function that sends a tweet or posts to Slack or whatever, right? We're passing data securely to the container, right? But once it gets into the container, those keys are read into memory before they're shipped out to, let's say, Twitter, which is also SSL, but for a brief moment, it's in memory. So security is a pretty big concern for us because that sort of thing needs to be protected from whoever is running that node. It could be some random person, running a node in their basement. But similarly, if FN server is running in a data center somewhere, whoever is operating that data center should also not have access to the actual data that's going in and out of Docker functions, right? So I don't know if it's exactly in line with this topic, but it is another security concern that we have, and probably I think everyone should have around data and Docker containers.
That's a bit like wider topic, as you said. This is like the general security of the FN. Like, what's the like a day two? What's the day two after deploying FN? Like, how can I operate it? How can I ensure that the deployment is secure? How can I ensure that the secrets of the user, like the user's configuration, is secure, and etc. Like, there are a bunch of questions related to the FN security, but not in terms of the code itself, but in terms of the deployment. And since only we as the FN community, we've done only like very small deployments based on the FN Helm charts. So it's relatively simple deployments. So the thing you've been talking about, Greg, is more about doing like something that called FN Cloud, comparing to what the Alex has with OpenFast Cloud. So like, as long as we think that we want to get the FN Cloud, we can start thinking about what's the security, what kind of a security we would provide, like what we can do in terms of that, or how can we document that to those who's going to run the FN in their like data centers.
Yeah, so I'll clean this up later, but it definitely sounds like they're related because they're all in line with how do you basically secure both your functions and the environment that the functions run in. So part of it is a developer story and part of it is an operational story, and I think they're both related to. Well, one of them is related to sort of day two operations. So let me. I'll clean these notes up, but it sounds like two really good topic areas to start having ongoing conversation.
Yeah, one thing that we've been working with our mentors. One of them's from Arweave, and he's a pretty brilliant security and cryptography guy. He was talking about SGX. Are you guys familiar with SGX?
No, sorry.
It's basically hardware-bound containers. It's something developed by IBM. It's not complete. But it basically, I don't know enough about it and how it works, but it is something. If you're running a Docker container within an SGX container, the SGX container is a secure container secured by hardware, specialized hardware. I can find out more about it and pass it along, but it was something that came up in our discussions about security.
Cool, yeah, please do. Okay, good. Let's move on. We've got about 20 minutes, and I want to make sure that we get time to cover any of these PRs that need discussing. A couple notes from last week. Dennis, I know you put a couple comments in here. One of them was adding Invoke support to SDK. I think you called into question whether that's necessary. Does anybody want to talk about that?
For now, we have two separate Swagger API docs. One we have only for CRUD operations over application functions and triggers. And the separate one we have for the Invoke API. But for now, the Invoke API is only an HTTP API. So there's no point doing anything related to Invoke API because no matter what you're gonna do with the Swagger doc, you would still need to have a flexibility of creating your own HTTP request. So any wrapper on top of that will basically limit your capabilities of things you got used to do with your native HTTP frameworks within any types of programming language you've got used to. So the only thing that actually matters for now is the SDK itself. So the thing that I've mentioned this previous week was the serverless framework integration. It has old Node.js code, and now we need to update it in order to get a new integration with a newer FN. So we need to put on a schedule SDK release for FN Go that we have for now, and the CLI use the FN Go as a base library, and we need to get the rest SDKs for that. Including Java SDK and probably Python SDK. But certain of those, they have problems like Java SDK. It doesn't work out of the box when you generate it from the Swagger stack. But the Node SDK that was mentioned here is already merged. And I'm looking for one who's done the previous releases. I'm not sure that we have a credential somewhere to the NPM storage to upload new artifacts.
Got it.
But the code is already there. You just need to do a distribution, basically.
Okay, so I added SDK releases to the current roadmap. I think there was we did notice that there was no Java one release, but the code I think has been submitted already or committed already.
Sorry, is this for calling invoke from within a function?
As I said, there are two parts. So we have one Swagger spec for a fan API. So with that, you can do CRUD operations with functions, applications, configuration, etc. Basically, those things that you've got used to do to work with the fan CLI. But we also have the other smaller spec that basically implements the dash invoke path of the FN API. So this is the separate one. And we haven't generated anything for that because there is no point for now because the FN has only HTTP trigger. So basically,
that's not true though.
Okay. Can you comment that?
Yeah, I mean, we need to add it so that we can have support for all the provider stuff for all the SDKs, for one. So, and Invoke has all the stuff around signing on the service now. So, I mean, I think the main difference is that so that people can have a more consistent experience doing that on and off. I mean, you can make the argument that all of our API is just HTTP, and we can make people build HTTP requests on their own for any of the endpoints. I mean, that's not the point of the SDKs at all. But we have to have support for that. Just like take this FNID, invoke this function, here you go. And we have to add stuff so they can do headers and all that. But it's just something we need to add. I think it was a mistake not to put it in the Swagger. We did it just to split up the CP and DP stuff, but we need to just add it. The other thing on the SDKs, I think we need to look at using a different generation library so that we can actually have, Java that works. We can generate a Ruby SDK. The Go SDK has like 2 different SDKs right now. It has the V1 SDK even, which we don't even need. I think there's a lot of stuff to do on the SDKs in general. We just removed a bunch of endpoints too, so we need to generate SDKs that don't have those endpoints. But
okay, so there's a couple versions of the Go one. It sounds like can Invoke be added to Swagger pretty easily?
Yeah, we have another Swagger file for it. I mean, we wanted to have 2 just because there's different, there's basically different APIs against different nodes, I guess, but.
Got it. Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a bunch of SDK work that needs to be captured, so I'll put that on the roadmap to ensure it's.
Yeah.
We need to discuss that.
Automated and stuff too. Yeah.
Okay. maybe that's something we can talk about with you, Mike, at some point. How to maintain the Swagger and ensure that or we'll see.
Yeah,
I want to ensure that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to make sure that we have some kind of automation behind generating these from Swagger docs.
Right. And it could be a bigger conversation because, well, of course, this is open source project, so we probably can pick whatever tool we want. I was thinking Oracle-wise, we normally have some sort of tool. But anyway, yeah, certainly we can have that conversation.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for bringing that up, you guys. We'll keep that conversation going, but there's certainly some low-hanging fruit there. Let's see. I also got a comment from administrator to everyone. Is that you, Ivan? Yeah, I'm not on mute. Are you connected to the call? Happy to, oh, okay, you're just texting or chatting. So I'm happy to discuss that. Is there something specific about IoT and 32-bit platforms and .NET Core that you want to discuss? Why don't you write up some questions in the either in Slack or the group chat there, and we can come back to them at the end. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of a time or the rest of the time in open issues PR review. So there's a few, I put in kind of the latest issues and PRs into here. I think some of them probably no discussion necessary, most of them. A couple of them just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to talk about. So it sounds like we increased the name length, the caps for the name length of FN and apps and stuff. So sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. That was my request, and that's huge for us. So thank you, Reed, for making that change.
Cool. And then I saw add an extension point that it's like basically a hook into container creation. That was Jan. He's not on the call. Is there any? Yeah, go ahead.
They ended up doing that a different way. So, yeah, I don't know if there's interest in having that really. The way that they ended up doing it seems better, really, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. There's another way.
Yeah, they basically added some decorator to the driver package that we have so that they could modify stuff and intercept stuff.
Cool.
Anyway.
Extract name validation from model validators. I think was that? Oh no, this was VZ development.
Yeah, Vince, I think was his name.
Vince, yeah.
He looks like Mike from show Jersey Shore or something. Yeah.
Good. There's a bunch of combo here. So, oh, it's merged already. Great.
Yeah, he's been doing some work. He works at Oracle too, but he's not in the functions group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try and invite him along here. Let's see. Vince's PR is merged. Okay. And then you had a big chunk of work around removing all the logs, calls, API, async, and hybrid. I think there was some conversation about the need for a calls API somewhere. Obviously, async needs to be rethought. Is there any particular conversation to be had about this right now?
So
go ahead.
That was me. I talked to a couple of folks who've been using FN. They're from Russia. So they've been using calls API to, they built basically a wrapper around calls API to pull the statistics of the calls into Prometheus. So they've used that to show users like the visualization of how their workload goes on. But when we would remove the calls API, the only option they have to display the graphs is only using the extensions for calls. Like we have an extension that does like two methods. Like the one is before call, and the other is the after call. and there you can get a calls, basically the state of the call itself, so you can see if it's failed or not. But removing calls API is similar to what we've done to logs API. We introduced a replacement with the syslog, but we're not introducing anything in favor of calls API for now. Like, what's the user story with the calls? How can we, as a FN operator, I do understand how can integrate FN with Prometheus and Grafana to get some visualizations. But as a user, I have only FN API endpoints. How can I build anything on top of that? How can I work with the FN to let it show me how my workload is going on? Would it be like a third-party tools or something that is built into the FN? So this is something not clear, and as Reed stated, that it's a separate feature we need to like probably talk about, but not sure if people are actually interested in that. Because when Reed published for at first moment when he published this PR, the community was kind of silent on that. So not sure people actually used calls API before that.
Okay. Is this something that can be added as an extension?
So yeah, but it's only for the operators, but there's no user story for calls for the replacement of call APIs. Like, what is the replacement for that? Or we're just saying that you can get the call states. No, you no longer can get a call state for any of your calls. So that's what actually kind of like bothers me.
Reed, what were you thinking?
We're removing the API, the part of the FN API that has the people actually been using that, but they have an alternative with the extent.
Well, this is Reed's PR, so why don't we hear from him what the plan is with calls API and
Okay.
Well, I think what Dennis is saying, I think we basically need some kind of statistics for users to be able to view like how many function invocations are on their application in a certain time window, kind of stuff like that. Is that what you're saying, Dennis?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So that's true. We don't have very good statistics for users on things like calls, like how many functions errored in the last hour, that kind of stuff, which the calls API you could do, but it didn't really have roll-ups or anything like that. It's kind of an open question. I think for open source, we can kind of just use Prometheus and get by for a minute, but it becomes an issue when it's this separation between users and operators. Anyway, I think, yeah, if anybody has ideas, it would be great, but it's hard to figure out where to hang that off of and how to aggregate it in a clustered FN setup and all that kind of stuff. So,
I mean, so logs are spit out through the sys. How is there a similar mechanism for calls, or is that just plumbed up as like Prometheus or whatever it uses?
Yeah, I mean, so one of my comments in there to Dennis was, and it's actually pretty easy to just connect to syslog if you're using syslog for the logging stuff. You could pretty easily connect to syslog and then use it in the calls extension stuff and then log a line, with, hey, this function errored, or hey, this function finished at this time. We're trying to add that into the logs, but it's tricky because we're using the Docker logging drivers. Sorry, the ambulance is coming for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we definitely need to probably add in some story to that. Maybe actually, let's see, remove calls logs.
Yeah, I mean, so we're trying to basically have it so that when the call starts, we'll log it in the call itself. It's something we can do at the FDK level. The problems are, if it never actually reaches the point of function execution, then you don't see that it failed. For example, it could just try out at the load balancer and never run, and you would never know. So
Gotcha.
there's just issues, but
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Dennis. I've added it to the roadmap. Story for surfacing call logs. I think that definitely warrants some further discussion around what that might look like. Okay, unless there's any other thoughts on that, general FTK cleanup. I don't think there's any. I doubt there's much conversation to happen there, other than we just got to keep plugging through it. Mike, I know you're working hard on it. I think there's a few things that might be hanging off me that I will try and wrap up as well. And I think I have some notes to review the new Java FTK stuff you put in. Let's see. Cleanup, running production documentation. I added that to the roadmap, so that's all about day 0, day 1, day 2 operating FN in both a distributed mode and non-distributed mode. Support for C#, that's an issue that's being slowly closed through the new FTK that was released. FTK cleanup is an issue.
Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have official FDKs, and then we have like a community FDKs, which the C# and the .NET FDK is going to be added soon to our docs. So the only thing that we don't have is the guideline for FDKs, FDK development. We only have a document, what's the FDK and what's the contract between FN and a container is, but like there is no like an explicit guideline. The only one we had is that I've tried to explain in my Medium post, saying like what you need to do in order to develop a new FDK. So this is something being out, and also for FDKs that our community develop, should we say them to tell them that the first thing you need to do right after you have a working code for FDK, just create and init images for FN CLI. This is something that it's not kind of documented. It's only on our. We know that because we've done that. In order to give a chance to grade and to introduce new languages to FN CLI.
On the C# thing, I think it brings up an interesting point about what we're gonna do about these community edition things. So, like one path is we could bring them in and keep them up to date. So, for example. Things like this FN user that we're using to run functions with now. I mean, changes like this are likely to happen, maybe not very often, but occasionally. And how do we verify that all the community edition images are actually compatible with this? And are the community maintainers going to maintain it? And I think the images and the actual FDK code itself, both of those things are things that we could bring in, or we could try to just point to the community versions of it, but we haven't really defined what we want to do there.
Yeah, I mean, that's related to older conversations about like, here's the set of ones that we'll support out of the box, and then the rest will have to be community supported for a while until we decide to vote them up into official support.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've only got the one, I think, right now. Well, no, that's not true. There's a couple others that are probably not being maintained actively, but that exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. For now, let's try and limit the scope of the things we can officially support, and then we'll try and push on the community. But then probably have that as an ongoing discussion. Cool. Both of you, sorry, go ahead.
On the thing you said about the document we have for building FDKs, if there's something from your Medium post that's missing in that document, can you add it to that document? I think that should be basically, the document should have everything you need to build an FDK that just works. And if we're missing any parameters there, we need to add them. So
this is kind of tricky because our officially supported FDKs didn't follow the common spec. So the APIs within different FDKs is different. Like the Java FDK has its own API. Go has its own API, and like and the rest one doing something they would like to do, but something in line with the like the guidelines we've been keeping in our minds. So that's kind of problematic, because once we have a formalized doc, we had to say like, hey, we do official FDKs, but they're not compatible with the spec we've done.
Well,
So,
can you update it? I don't think that was the intention at all. So
no, I know it's not intentional, but it's something that exists. So like, so here's the question: if we are going to have a document that documents the API of an FDKs, should we ask the FDK maintainers to follow the spec? Would it be a recommended spec or something that is mandatory?
I'm trying to follow what you're saying. Are you saying that for just like vanity stuff, like the context thing, where?
Yeah, mainly context thing, because it's different within different FDK. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's not a requirement. So, I get what you're saying. Maybe, I mean that's a requirement, I guess, to be officially supported, but it's not a requirement just to get the thing to work. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying that for community FDKs, no matter what they would do, because it's community thing, it's not, if they want to become like an official FDK, they had to follow all the specs we would have for FDKs. But the thing I'm trying to say that our own FDKs, Java SDK, Go SDK, Python SDK, Node SDK, they have the context attribute of the FDK. It has different APIs. So the user experience between different FDKs may vary, but not only because of the programming language itself, but with the library itself. It just looks and feels different.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think we basically said we want it to be idiomatic to whatever language. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Anyway, I think the document we could add some stuff like that to the document. Just saying, hey, we build this context object and stuff like this, and then be idiomatic or whatever. If we need to add a few things like that about vanity, then I think that's fine. But yeah, it's not a requirement. We can just say that though in the document. But I think that document should be, you go do that and you have a FDK that works and looks reasonably okay.
I think you should always write it like this is what we want in the future, right? So this is how it should be, and not worry so much about what's not perfect yet.
I added a sub-bullet to documentation cleanup about FDK creation, idiomatic maintainability. So we can capture that in our ongoing. So we are at 10:45. I think the promise was that this is supposed to end after 45 minutes. So I don't want to keep anyone longer than that. Ivan, I have your question captured here. I'm going to put it in the notes for next week or 2 weeks from now, which I'm technically supposed to be starting paternity leave, but we'll figure something out. Someone else can run the meeting, or I'll be here unless the baby's out. Other than that, any last comments? We're 2 minutes over, so I don't want to take too much time, but anything short anyone wants to?
I just had a question. I saw that the PR that Reed made, what's the process for that and timeline for that getting merged in, built, and then put into a Docker image that's deployable? This is the first kind of issue that I've been involved with, so I just kind of want to know what the process is like.
Yeah, my handy dandy green stamper is out of town this week. He's in Finland, so I'm gonna try to beg somebody else. But I think maybe even Dennis could look at it today, probably, and it gets released after we merge it, so that's pretty much immediate. You get a new image and a new version.
So it's part of your CI/CD or something?
Yeah, it's part of CI/CD. It just bumps the patch version up. Yep.
That's awesome.
Cool. And you should be able to see the status of that, I think, in the PR, which will post the link to the CI/CD job.
Got it.
I think.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Cool.
Okay, everybody, thanks for joining, and I will see/chat with you in a couple weeks. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.